Hello, ARRL members and QST readers the world around. I'm Dave Kessler, amateur radio call sign KE0OG, and I write the Ask Dave column in QST. And this has to do with the March issue, which talks about SWR meters, antennas, and the ionosphere. Specifically, we're going to talk about a question that came from Chip Lohman, NN4U. Now, he has a receive-only antenna that's a wideband antenna. It looks like a mag loop, but it's not. It's a circle about 3 feet around, and then down at the bottom is a very wideband preamp, and to make the signals big enough to bother sending over the coax, and then sends that down to your receiver. It is not a transmit antenna. Now, he's concerned he has a KX3. And before he listens on a channel, he wants to make sure that he's got everything tuned up so he can get the best signal out of the antenna, and wonders if he can use the KX3 to just put out a little bit of power and double check that, what's going on. Now, here's the problem with that, other than right out of the way, you're going to smoke the preamp. We're going to look at what an antenna tuner is trying to do, in this case, the one in the KX3, okay? And then we're going to take a look at what's actually inside that receive-only antenna. And we'll find that there is something in between there that we have to be careful with, okay? So let's take a look at the whiteboard. Now, before we start drawing with symbols and stuff, let's take a look at what that antenna is about. It's a loop about 3 feet in diameter, okay? So it's usually made of like copper tubing or aluminum tubing, something like that. Now, there's no coupling to it. Since it's a receive-only antenna, there's no capacitance in there to give this high Q, so it's very low Q. And it receives the medium frequencies and the high frequencies, okay? So it's about 0.5 megahertz to 30 megahertz. This isn't very big. So what they do is they create a preamp down here. It's an amplifier. And this, I'll give you the standard symbol for an amplifier is that, okay? And it's balanced input, all right? From here and from here. And then what goes out of here is an unbalanced output. It goes over your coax. Now, this is an active amplifier. And what you need to do is actually send power to this. And this is done by a technique where they send a little DC over the cable. The specifics don't matter so much here. So you are receiving the output of the preamp. Now, this is designed to pick up extremely weak signals. So weak that the noise figure from the coax would be too much and would overpower them. One way you get around that is to avoid the transmission line entirely and put the preamp right in here, and then it feeds the transmission line. And when it gives a little bit of a boost, okay, it can go over the coax and the noise figure is better. Noise figure is the ability to receive very weak signals. Now let's take a look at what we're doing when we're tuning an antenna. Okay, this is your KX3, okay, a little antenna tuner out. And it thinks it's talking to an antenna, okay? So what the KX3 does is it sends out a signal, a very small signal, and then it measures the reflected signal from the antenna. And we know unless this is one-to-one, there will be some reflections. So we take the voltage out and the voltage back and do the necessary algorithms, and it gives you an SWR, and it tunes it up so you have a real nice SWR. And it puts a little reactance here because this thing is reactive. That's a coil and a capacitor, okay. The reactances are complex conjugates of each other. And that allows you send the information, you send the transmission up here, you get a little reflected, it's caught here, and with the next cycle of the transmission, it's sent back to the antenna. So it has multiple opportunities to be radiated. Now, the problem with coax, really any type of transmission line, is that there are losses. And since this signal from your transmitter goes up and down here so many times, the resistance in the coax or other transmission line eventually starts to dissipate some of that. This is why you like to have low SWR. There's less lost in the line resistance here. Now let's look at what we're doing if we're using that antenna. It's an antenna, so we'll use the symbol for an antenna. And then there's an amplifier here, okay? And then this goes that way like that. So if you send a signal out, it goes right into the output of this very sensitive preamp, okay? There won't be anything reflected, really, so it'll give you a one-to-one. Really, under most circumstances, there's nothing reflected, okay? And this measure that we have here is meaningless because it's not actually reflected from the antenna. It's from that preamp down there. Now, the preamp, as I said, is fed with 12 volts that goes over a bias T. The details depend on the antenna. I know MFJ has one. Chameleon antenna, they have one too. W6LVP has one for sale also. They all work the same way. I happen to have one of each of those and can verify that they're great antennas. So you've got this problem here that you've got this preamp in the way, and you don't want to send anything in there. Some of these are extremely sensitive. Some of them have got protection circuits built into them and so on. But the protection circuits are against nearby antennas that might put a large signal on that. So that protects the input. If you send a signal in here, then that can go to the output. So if there's some way that you're just going to listen, okay, to disable transmit, most menus on most radios have the ability to disable transmit. Now, why do you want to do that? You want to do that because, like, you're working on the antenna and you've got a friend over here, and if the friend keys the antenna accidentally, it can cause an RF burn or something like that, or you get quite a shock while you're working on these things. So you can use the menu to disable the transmit. Now remember, enable it when you're done. It's too easy to forget in there. But what you want to do is not ever check the SWR. The output here is 50 ohms by design. And so you put 50 ohm coax on it, and here the SWR on that is 1-to-1. So that's why I'm saying it's not a good idea. Even if you're really wanting to do it, you'd never send an output into this. There's much too high a probability of blowing the preamp. So that's why I say in here, don't do that. Chameleon actually sent me an upgraded preamp at one point so I could review it, and there is a review video on my YouTube channel that you can look at about that. But bottom line here, if you have a receive-only antenna, treat it as receive only. Never transmit anything into it, even the small amount of signal that might come out of your amplifier. You can't tell from the radio. For example, my Ten-Tech radio up there, this is my old HF radio right here. When you clicked on the tune button, which is right there, the thing originally put out a full 100 watts to tune it. And then they came out with a firmware update, and Tune only put out 20 watts. Well, 20 watts is going to blow that. Preamplifier from here to Kingdom Come. We don't want that to happen, okay? So keep it just in receive only. Now, one of the nice things about this is that it's very broadband. You don't have to change bands or anything with it. It's like I said, it covers from about 500 kilohertz all the way up to 30 megahertz. So you can spread out your waterfall on your software-defined radio, whatever you have, and see what's going on across the band, across several bands, so on and so forth. Some of the higher-end radios have an option for a receive-only input that you can use instead of your regular antenna when you want to receive. You use this, for example, on 160 meters where you might have a beverage antenna for receive, and then you transmit on a standard dipole or vertical. Okay, this is very common and is done with some of the higher end radios. Now, the radio that I have recommended to a lot of people, which is the ICOM 7300. This radio over here, when it tunes, it just puts out just enough to tune it. One of the things that can make tuning radios a little bit difficult is if anybody in the area happens to be transmitting, because you receive that signal very strong, and if you happen to be measuring the reflected power at that moment in time, you'll get a very erroneous reading. So make sure of your SWR before you go ahead. So there you have it, and I would suggest the KX3 would be an excellent shortwave listening receiver, or if you just want to say listen to what's happening during a contest or something like that, you can put that on it. But please make sure that you disconnect the coax for the receive-only antenna and then reconnect your coax for the transmit antenna, and you'll be in good shape. None of the warranties for these antennas covers transmitting into it accidentally, and they are not inexpensive. They can be in excess of $300. So you want to treat them with the care they deserve. It's like a $300 camera versus, say, a $50 camera. If you got to drop a camera, drop the $50 camera, okay? Because you drop the $300 camera, it'll break on you. Whereas the other probably won't. In fact, it's designed for kids to use. So there you have it. I would encourage you, if you are not a member of the ARRL, to join. It's worth it. It costs about what a tank of gas costs these days. And you put gas in your car every week, whereas you only have to submit your payment to the ARRL once in the year. Now notice, you can, for an extra fee, have 1, 2, 3, or 4 paper magazines sent to you. I have paid extra to have the QST sent to me, but I'm kind of changing my mind on that a little bit, because here's the thing. The soft copy editions to those magazines, all 4 magazines, are put up on the web for you to read. You can read all 4 of them. It doesn't matter whether you're Tech General, Extra, anything. You can read all 4 of them for no extra fee. And so I almost always read QST online before I get my paper copy. So this will be ready for you when you read the March QST, and until we next meet for the April QST 73.